Good morning. My name is Chris Barrineaus, and I am one of the pastors here at Capstone Church. We're so glad that we could come up here and share with you guys this morning. This is my lovely wife, Laura. Thank you. Yep, yeah, exactly. So for some of you who might be new here or might not know who we are, we have 4 children. Our oldest son, Blake, is here on the front row with our youngest son, Caleb. And then we have 2 daughters in the middle who were here at the 9 o'clock service. And so we are going to share our story of just how God kind of brought everything together. Caleb, come up here for a sec. I want you to say hey to everybody.
He's excited about this Sunday. He knows it's his.
All right. Turn around and wave, okay? Say hey.
Hey.
All right. So this is Caleb, and we're going to tell you guys how Caleb was made in China but born in the USA. All right? And I'll explain that in just a few minutes. But he has a special story and a special way that he came into our life. And that's what today and this month is all about. All right. You go have a seat. Good job. Our story, the story series and kind of this whole thing has been leading from the kingdom a couple of weeks ago or months ago when we did the kingdom series to last month when we did the shape series and our experiences in life. And just really how all of those things come to build the kingdom, to bring God glory. And so that's what we are doing, is that we're sharing our story today, but it's not about the Barrineaus, it is about God's glory. And so the things that we say today, it's not about, oh, good job, Chris and Laura. It's about God working in our lives and just through obedience. And so one of the things that we start off with whenever we share the story is the verse that really we held on to this whole time. It's Ephesians 3:20. And when we were going through this deal and we were trying to figure out what life was going to hold for us, we had thoughts in our minds. But really, God had something immeasurably more, abundantly more than we could ever ask or imagine through the power that worked within us. And so that's what was working. That's what was happening is that we had this thought. We had an idea of what was going on or what we wanted. But God had something so much more and so much greater, immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine. And so that's what we're going to share, just a little bit about how this whole thing came to be and how Caleb got to be in our life. So I'm going to let Laura kind of share where we were at about 12 years ago and how it all came to be.
And I think I'll do better this service than the first service. I kind of.
Yeah, it's on.
Can y'all hear me? I think.
Yeah.
Yes, we actually were supposed to speak next weekend, and I think I would have been better prepared next weekend because I've had a daughter graduate from high school this week and into school and all that. So it's been I have a very full mama's heart this week. So, but it's sweet, and God's time is perfect to get to share Caleb's story with y'all this Sunday. So about 12 years ago. To start off with, Chris and I are both the last of 4 children in our own families. And I laugh saying they say babies should never get married in a family. But it's working out pretty good for us. I think we're going to stick with it. So almost 22 years later, so we've done pretty good. But we both came from big families, loved big families, wanted a big family. I think we said before we got married, it's always a good thing to talk about how many kids you want before you get married. We talked about that, and we said we wanted 4. So we had Blake, and we had Faith, and then Libby came a little quicker than we were expecting, and then Chris said we were good. We needed to stop right there. So, but I really wanted 4 kids, and Chris thought we were good with 3, and I really wanted to adopt, and Chris thought we were good with 3. And so we talked about it, and we obviously weren't on the board together, so I said, I'm just going to pray about it, and if this is meant to be, it'll be. So prayed about it, and then I don't know if y'all remember this. It was a very tragic situation when Stephen Curtis Chapman and Mary Beth Chapman's daughter, Maria Sue, was tragically killed by their older son accidentally ran over her. It was a very sad situation. That story was in the news, and I was reading about it, and they had adopted several kids from China. and they were doing a interview on Larry King Live. I've never watched Larry King Live, but we cut it on that night because I was interested to hear their story. So Chris and I were watching that, and that was like the beginning of August, I think. And then on our anniversary, which is August 14th, Chris gave me the book Showy and Dot, which is the book that Mary Beth Chapman wrote about her little daughter, Showy Joy. And he wrote on the inside cover, I think let's pursue adoption. Let's look into that. I'm open to that now. God had just kind of spoken to his heart, I think, through that interview and just the story they shared, that maybe this was what God was calling our family to do. So we started... I'm going to be honest with you. I went in with a very notion of, okay, we want to be a family for a child. We want, a child that needs a family. We want to be that for them. I kind of thought I didn't really want to deal with birth families or birth parents. I wanted it to be really neat and clean, and I didn't want it messy at all. And, all these things that, as I said, first service, a very probably, honestly, immature approach to it. Very probably focused on us way more than, okay, God, we're just being obedient. And so we started looking at different agencies to see what would be the right route for us to go. We were open to whatever God was calling us, international, domestic, whatever. I just kind of didn't want to do DSS. That just seemed a little too messy to me. So we started visiting different agencies, and we'd leave and be like, I don't know that that's right. And anyway, we ended up going to the DSS open house, and I got in the car. I was like, oh, that's where we're supposed to get licensed through. That's not what I wanted to do. But I knew that was, at the time, what I thought. So we went through the very arduous process of getting licensed through DSS, and then we got our license in November of, I guess, 2009. That would be right, 2009. And I thought, okay, we'll get a call any day now. And, the days and months went by, and we would get calls, would you consider? And Chris and I always were pretty faithful to pray and then say, yeah, we felt like we were open to whatever God had for us. But then we wouldn't hear anything back. And so about 8 months had gone by, and we hadn't gotten placement or anything, and hadn't gotten a placement. And Chris and I were like, well, maybe we misunderstood. Maybe we're supposed to foster. Maybe we're not supposed to adopt. So we had called on the Friday to say, maybe we're going to change our license from adoption to foster. And that Monday, we were in the old capstone, which was an old bilo, and I'll never forget, I was mopping in the front room, and my phone rang, and it was a friend of mine who was Rhonda Littleton. A lot of you may know her. She was the children's minister at Simpsonville First Baptist. And she said, Laura, I got an email from a friend of mine that lives in Shanghai, China, and she had gotten an email from a couple, a married couple that were pregnant with their first child, 24 weeks pregnant, and they had found out that their child had Down syndrome. And basically they scheduled them to have an abortion the following week. But they weren't wanting to have an abortion. They were wanting to find an adoptive family. Is that something you and Chris would consider? And, this kind of seems so far-fetched, an email from Shanghai, China, and Chris was out of town. It just kind of seemed, I very easily could have dismissed it, but I thought, well, again, God works in mysterious ways, so I'll call and ask Chris. And as I was saying, first service, we did the spiritual gifts test. And Chris, what is your spiritual gift?
Yes, my spiritual gift is faith. So I named my daughter that. No, really, that was what we did. Anytime we got a call from DSS or whatever, it was, sure, yes, what's next? And so when she called me, I was in Hilton Head on a retreat or a conference, and I remember getting the phone call, going out on the balcony there in the hotel, and being like, "What? Shanghai? Huh? Okay, sure, whatever. Let's see what happens." And I think maybe, I don't know if you're here today, and this might even be the only thing that you hear, and kind of the challenge is that sometimes we don't give God a chance. Sometimes we might just say, yeah, there's no way that's going to work out. I'm not even going to pursue that. And we miss out on so much. And nothing special about us other than just our obedience and our openness and our faith, a willingness to put our trust in God. And so we were able to do that. And so from that initial phone call and that initial email, we were able to experience so much more than what we even thought. Robbie's going to put a picture up. This is of Ryan and Heidi. This is so Ryan is Caleb's birth dad, and he was born in California, lived in California, grew up in California, and then decided to move to Shanghai. When he was in Shanghai, he fell in love with Heidi, who is from Shanghai, China, and they married, wonderful family, love each other so much. But the
I'm going to interrupt you 1 second. I did tell them we were live streaming this, so hey, Heidi and Ryan, if y'all are watching this, we love y'all.
So another, again, great opportunity through technology to be with them. But normally in China, with just the different things that their culture is, it's when you go to the hospital or the doctor and you do an amniocentesis or whatever, and they find out that the baby has birth defect, Down syndrome in this case. They say your child has Down syndrome and your abortion's scheduled for next week. Because that's 98% of the people who have that go through with an abortion. They see it as the thing to do because they don't know the joy in life that can happen. They have to take care of that person. There's no education for the child. There's no child care for the child. And Ryan and Heidi both worked, and Heidi had to take care of her father at the time. And so they knew that they were not going to be able to provide the life that he needed at that time. And Ryan especially knew that there were things out there that could help him. And so Ryan, God bless him, and so thankful, that night he got on the computer and emailed all these different agencies, special needs here, adoption agencies in America, in China, and all this stuff. And then finally, a friend of Rhonda's who is living in Shanghai, she's from Simpsonville. She was living in Shanghai, China, and working at a special needs clinic. She got the email, and she didn't ignore it either. And she forwarded it to Rhonda and said, Rhonda, what can we do to help? And so that's when Rhonda called Laura and said, hey, what do you guys think? And of course, again, nothing that we're special. We just said, all right, let's see what happens, and let's start pursuing. And so that was on a Monday or Tuesday, and by the end of that week, we had been contacting Rhonda and contacting Ryan and Heidi, emailing. We had a phone call with them, and so we had convinced them not to have the abortion, and that we would start pursuing how we could possibly even go through with this adoption. We were willing if they were willing, and so they then decided that they were willing for us to be able to adopt their child. And so that began the whole process of logistics of how in the world are we going to get a baby from Shanghai, China, to America, and to figure out how to do this adoption. Initially, it was good because he was going to have an American citizenship because of his father being an American, but there was still going to be like this waiting period in China of when he was born of how we were going to get him back to the United States. We had 3 kids at home. How are we going to leave our 3 kids for a couple of months probably to deal with that if we were going to be over there? Who was going to take care of Caleb when he was born? So all those things we were trying to figure out. We were on the phone with senators. We were on the phone with adoption agencies, all this kind of stuff, trying to figure this whole thing out. And so we just had just these crazy thoughts and whatever. And then again, remember we said we didn't really want to have to deal with the birth parents. We thought this was just going to be, that would be too messy. But then here we are, Ryan and Heidi, and Laura and Heidi became best friends over email and phone calls. And then we just threw out the idea, what if you came to America and had Caleb in America? And so Laura one day checked her email, and the email said,
we're coming to the USA. So Heidi and I got where we would email every day, and we were just trying to figure out, Chris and I were going to go at birth and be maybe with him for a week. And then he was going to have to go into like a cradle care until he got a visa and was medically, we weren't sure if he was going to have medical issues, medically able to fly. And then me and my mom were going to go back and bring him home. And I just was like, I just don't think I could leave him. But I can't leave my 3 kids at home. But who's going to keep them? And then Heidi just, she said, I don't think I can keep him for that long. And understandably so. We were just talking about how is this going to work. And so she in China at that time, you could only have one child, and she got 6 months maternity leave. So she said, we just were kind of emailing. I was like, well, maybe we'll take maternity leave before he comes. He was due January 16th. And so we talked about that. And so, yeah, she said, we're coming to the United States. So they arrived November 13th, or 14th. And so we picked them up at the airport and had dinner at O'Charlie's. And that was our first, we have a little picture. We should have brought that one. But anyway, of the first time we met Heidi and Ryan. And just, I already loved them just from our communication. But then when they came and we just talked, again, I'm so thankful. I did not have my way, and I missed out on the blessing and the beauty that was in that relationship. They became part of our family while they were here. They came to my family's Thanksgiving meal. They went on fountain and carriage rides at Christmas time. They came to our women's ornament exchange. Capstone was so good to welcome them and love them, as well as Simpsonville First Baptist. They were living with Rhonda, and Rhonda lived about 2 miles from our house, and she was just such a wonderful friend to them. So it's just neat how our churches and our communities and friends and families all pulled together to love them. So it was a real blessing. I think, in my mind, you try to think, how does someone give up a child? And I still don't know that I could ever have that kind of strength or ability to do that. But I'm so thankful that Ryan and Heidi were able to, they loved Blake and Faith and Libby. God, they spoiled them while they were here so much. But they got to meet their grandparents. They got to see what Caleb's room was going to be like. They got to just really get a picture of Caleb's life, and it was just a blessing. So we just kind of embraced them into our family and just fell even more in love with them. And they would do whatever we did, and Capstone was doing a soup kitchen on December 22nd, and Ryan and Heidi were going to go. I was going to pick them up, and they were going to go with us. And Chris had already gone to work, and Ryan called. He goes, so Laura, I don't think we're going to get to go to the soup kitchen. He said, Heidi thinks she's in labor. So I'm like, oh, my goodness, what? Oh, goodness, okay. So I called Chris, and he came home, and we took Heidi and Ryan to the hospital, and they checked her out and everything and told her they thought it was false labor. Well, Heidi was just so sweet and just so pleasing, and she just was like, Laura, I'm so sorry I kept y'all from going to the soup kitchen. We're like, Heidi, it is okay. It is okay. And she just felt so bad about that, and she said she was going to go home that night or that day and rest. Rhonda had gone out of town for the week, and so Ryan and Heidi had the house to themselves. So they just rested at the house that afternoon, and then we were having my big side of the family's Christmas, the Garrett side of the family Christmas that night, and they were going to go with us, but Ryan called and said, I think we're not going to go tonight. I think Heidi's tired, so we're just going to stay home, and I said, that's fine. So we got to my parents' house, and we were saying the blessing, and my phone rang, and it was Ryan, and he goes, y'all enjoy your meal, but I think we might need to go back to the hospital tonight, but y'all eat first, don't rush. I'm like, we'll be there in just a little bit. So we got the kids settled, and we headed over to Rhonda's, and I called, and Ryan answered, and I said, Ryan, we're on our way over. And Heidi was a really peaceful, sweet, quiet person. I could hear her in the background loudly. And I was like, Ryan, is she okay? And Ryan's like, she's fine. And I was like, she does not sound fine to me, Ryan. And so I'm like, Chris, get over there. So when we get over there, she's ready to have him. So I'm like, okay, do we call an ambulance? Do we take him to Hillcrest? In my mind, I thought he might need to go to NICU. I felt like we needed to get to Greenville. So, and I knew Chris had waited for this moment his whole life.
Yes, been training.
So I'll let you take it from here.
So I just said, get me in that minivan. I can get you to the hospital. So sure enough, we pile into the Honda Odyssey, and I'm cruising at about 100 down the Southern Connector. And if you go through the Palmetto Pass and don't stop, they will catch you. They will send you a ticket later on, but it's the best $22 I've ever spent. $10 fine and the toll twice. But yeah, so we're driving, and Laura, being a nurse, had delivered a baby before, but not her own, and not one with Down syndrome. And so she was doing great. She went into nurse mode, and she was, keeping Heidi calm. She was keeping Caleb in, and they were in the back seat, and we were cruising in the minivan. Laura had called Greenville Hospital and said, "We are on our way. We need help as soon as we get there." They were great. We, flew into the parking place. I did a 180,
We did not.
I'm just kidding. I have it in my mind that I did it that way. So we pulled up and jumped out of the car. They parked the car. We all started going up to the room. And again, they just did a great job of taking care of us. I remember going up into the hospital and to the elevator. And again, Laura amazingly just worked her magic and took care of everything and held it together. We hand Ryan and Heidi off to the nurses. They were in the triage room, gonna check her out. And so we get her there. We hand her off. Laura comes over to me and just boom, she just lost it. Okay, and then which is great because she held it together when she needed to, and then it was her time to lose it. And then she goes in, and literally 2 minutes later, we hear Caleb crying. Like, we made it there within 2 minutes. Again, my driving skills. We made it there and got him, and it was like he came out, and the nurses were going crazy. There was no doctor around, and nothing was going the way that we thought it was going to go.
We had a beautiful birth plan.
Yeah, and so we were going to spend this amount of time, and they were going to do all this, and everything was going to work out great. And then Caleb had different thoughts, and so like he usually does, and it just, but it worked, and so he was healthy, and the nurses came out and said everything was great, and so Laura and I were there, and we were kind of sitting out in the waiting room, and one of the craziest, greatest, most beautiful moments of my life occurred when they were taking Heidi to finally delivery.
Well, she was in triage.
Yes.
And then after she had him, they moved her to labor and delivery.
Right. And that's when the greatest moment, one of the coolest moments of my life happened.
So, yeah, I think I can hold it together this time.
Yeah.
I didn't do so well first service. But so they had Caleb on Heidi's chest and were rolling her, moving her from triage to labor and delivery. And, Heidi had been in so much pain in the car. And so when, the door closed, we heard the baby cry. I mean, literally when they were putting her on the table. When they brought her out, y'all, she just had she was so beautiful. She just had peace and happiness on her face. I mean, it was just, and little Caleb was laying on her chest, and I had been so worried about her. I was like, "Oh God, Heidi, are you okay?" And she just looked like it was the best day of her life. And so, of course, I was looking at Caleb too, and he was precious. But she said, "Caleb, do you see your mommy? There's your mommy." And it's just like, how does somebody do that? How does somebody have a child and then, give them to me? It just was a crazy, or give them to us. But in that moment, I was saying this first service, she loved him so much. She was willing to give him up so that he could have the life she wanted for him. She was that selfless and that sacrificial and loved him that much. And that's just, that was amazing testimony to me of just, love. And, of course, I loved her, and then, of course, we loved Caleb, and he was healthy and didn't need NICU, didn't need anything. He was just great, and we got to go. Again, the birth plan just kind of went out the window. We all spent, I guess, the next 4 or 5 hours, in the room together, and, it was just a sweet, sweet time of just being, with them and with Caleb, and, just a time I always treasure and won't ever forget. And Caleb's got a big smile on your face. You remember all that, Caleb? He was so sweet. He was the best baby. The Lord knew.
Yeah. Knew what was going to be coming for the next 10 years. But yeah, if y'all remember the Christmas of 2010, it was a white Christmas. So we came home on Christmas Eve, and it couldn't get any better in our life. And so that white Christmas came. We were on the way home with all the kids back in the minivan. And I remember the kids, being 10 years ago, they were like, yeah, we are home. Caleb's going to be here for Christmas. And so Santa gets to bring Caleb stuff too. And we're like, yeah, he does. Awesome. Caleb's so lucky. So, yep. But we had a great Christmas Eve. We had a great Christmas Day. It snowed on us. It was just like this. It was magical. And Ryan and Heidi were able to get back to Rhonda's house, and they were planning to stay there for several weeks to just to kind of recoup and everything like that. And so right there, if we ended the story there, everybody would be like, oh, that's the great story. But that's not even the whole really big part of everything. And there's so much more to what God had in mind. Again, not what we think, but what God thinks. Immeasurably more, abundantly more than all we can ask or imagine. Caleb's life, their sacrifice, our obedience, all led to even more greatness. And so that opportunity came over the next couple of weeks. In China, when you give birth, I know all the American ladies will be interested in this, you don't do anything for a month, okay? You literally stay in bed after you give birth for a month. And so I know all the American ladies are like, yeah, we need to adopt that tradition. So Ryan and Heidi had set it up that they were going to be at Rhonda's house for the next month, and that they were going to be able to be there, and she was going to be able to have the traditions and stuff that she was doing, the certain foods and all that kind of stuff that she needed. And so we were respecting their time. We were giving them space. We didn't know how much they would want to see Caleb, but they called us up and said, hey, can y'all bring Caleb over? And so we did. We had a great moment where the kids and all went over, and they had popcorn for Faith and, just all this great stuff. We were able to really spend some good time with them on that time. We had never really forced our faith or shared that much of our faith. We didn't ever try to really share it that much with them, just because it was already a unique situation, and we didn't want them to think that that's the only reason we were about this. But Rhonda was able to share just about Jesus and salvation and all that kind of stuff, and just the sacrifice that God had made through his own son, Jesus. And so also back in January of that year, there was an ice storm, and they were stuck in the house for several days. And so Rhonda was really able to share with them about Jesus. And so some great things happened because of that. And once the ice lifted up, Laura and I and the kids were all hanging out at Chick-fil-A, because where else would we go? And Laura, Heidi called Laura with some amazing news.
It was a Thursday, so they were going back to China on January 16th, which was his due date, and it was the Thursday before that. And again, we continued to talk to them, and anytime they wanted to see Caleb, they were welcome to see Caleb, but at the same time, they were, I knew they were processing a lot. But Heidi called, and like Chris said, we were at Chick-fil-A, and she said, Laura, I wanted to tell you something. And I said, okay. She goes, I accepted Jesus into my heart last night. And I'm like, okay. Oh my gosh, what, I think I just was again, I was just overwhelmed at God's goodness. Sometimes it's just hard to take it all in. And she was so excited. She said that she understood loving, that God loved us so much that he was willing to give his son up for us. She said she loved Caleb so much that she was willing to give him up to have a better life. That kind of sacrificial love, she understood. And she said that she started reading in Scripture, and then it said once you believe, you become a new creation. And she said, I want to be a new creation, Laura. I want to go back to China, a new creation. And she said, and I also continue to read, it says that once you believe, you're to be baptized. And she said, I can't be baptized in China. She said, do you think I can be baptized here before I go back? And I was like, yes, we can make that happen. And so I'm going to go back a second to our Capstone family is so good. They loved us. They just were so good to Heidi and Ryan, to us, especially kind of when we had Caleb, people were so sweet to bring us meals and do different things. And then Simpsonville First Baptist was so great to Heidi and Ryan, kind of looked after them, loved them, brought them meals, found Heidi had to eat really weird food according to her tradition. They found people to bring that food to her. It was just such a beautiful picture of the body of Christ, just really working together to love each other. So I got with Rhonda, and we were talking at the time. We were at the Bilo and didn't have a baptismal in Simpsonville First Baptist. They're like, we'll do it here. We'll have the baptism here. So I think we've got some pictures. But so we set up on that Saturday night before they were leaving to go back to China. On Sunday, we had a baptism service. I think 150, 200 people came. Heidi, you can see her talking there. She wanted to stand up and share. Again, the woman just amazes me, but she wanted to share her newfound faith with all those that came. She was not supposed to get her hair wet. That was one of the customs. That's why she has a little shower cap on for her baptism, but she wanted to go on with the full submergence. So that was, and her traditions were very meaningful to her. So it's just, again, another issue of obedience and sacrifice on her part that she wanted to go through that. Her face was pure joy the whole time. And then Ryan recommitted he had grown up Catholic but said he was a non-practicing Christian. He kind of recommitted his life to Christ. Heidi had said she was Buddhist, but I think she just said that. She said, I just said that because that's what everybody is in China. But she, accepted Christ as her Lord and Savior. And then the other picture, I had been bawling the whole time. That was just me and Heidi holding Caleb. And it's probably one of my most favorite pictures. So we had a great celebration for them. And then they went back to China the next day, and they were excited about going back to China because they wanted to share with their family and friends their newfound faith. And it was just amazing testimony. And Ryan's family lives out west. They've been wonderful too. Because of Facebook, we can all be in contact with each other and still are, and share pictures and comments. So it's just been, we have one big happy family. We had always said when Caleb turned 10, we were going to have a big family reunion, and we had that planned. COVID obviously didn't allow that to happen, so at some point we are going to all get together again.
Yep, and Ryan and Heidi have gone on to have another child, Zoe, who is maybe outside of the four Barrineaus, might be the cutest kid in the world. She's going to be a model, and Caleb's going to have a famous sister one day. She is beautiful. And so we love seeing all the stuff on Facebook about her. But again, the obedience that occurs leads to great things, leads to God's power and everything. But we also want to say it's not easy either. This isn't just this one great big fairy tale story. Caleb is crazy. Caleb is very difficult. We don't know what we're doing.
Majority of the time.
Yeah,
Sometimes we do.
Special needs, education, CPAP machines, and all these different kind of things. Speech, like I didn't really think that was going to be an issue, but it's an issue. Like what do we do? It's a constant reminder of obedience, and it's a constant submissiveness. Like we have to be submissive to the Lord because this is something that we are not going to figure out, and we don't want to come here and share and say, "Oh yeah, all you got to do is say yes, and life is wonderful." It's hard, and it's projected a different life for us, and again, not to us, but to God's glory. Ephesians 2:10 kind of helps us understand this whole thing, that we are God's workmanship, that God set us up for this whole thing. God sets you up for what he's calling you to do. And so as we share this story, and as we come up here, and as you hear the next couple of weeks, if you come in, if you come back, if you watch online, the people that are going to share about what God's doing in their life, but it's about his glory. There's nothing special about us. Ephesians 2:9 says we don't boast in ourselves, we boast in the Lord. There's nothing special about us. And so there's nothing special about you either. but you can be a part of God's glory. Your story can bring him glory. So I'm not sure what this story has to do with you. Nothing, everything, I don't know, but you've been a part of this. If this is your first time, maybe you're just like, well, that's a cool story, all right. Or I don't know why I had to listen to these people talk. But there's a challenge in there for you, I think. From just the beginning of just saying, you know what? Maybe sometimes I say no too quick. Maybe sometimes I don't give God a chance to work something out. Maybe I need to, instead of just pushing things off, maybe I need to be the person who lived in Shanghai just to forward an email to somebody else, to put somebody else in contact with something else. You might not have the ability to take care of things, but you can be that person that does something. And so as you hear these stories over the next couple of weeks, and as you get challenged, and hopefully you get reminded of God's faithfulness, you get reminded of just the trust that we can put into God, that he's got us, that he's got so much more for us if we just work through him, if we just lean on his power. And so that's our challenge today, and that's why we share the story, and that's why we think that there's so much more to Caleb's life than just giving life at the beginning. But there came salvation. There came the light that Caleb brings into a room. There came maybe future special needs adoptions through different people that he might come in contact with, and through people who might say, well, if they did it, they're nothing special. Maybe we can do it too. And so that's just a challenge as we share, just to kind of think about maybe what does this have to do with you? What is God calling you to do? What's God, it doesn't have to be adoption. It can just be a job. It could be anything. What are you wavering on that all you need to do is just say yes? Just give God our yes.
And I was going to say God's will is not always easy. It's not always comfortable. It's certainly not always convenient, but it's always good, and it's always pleasing, and there's peace. And even on the hardest days, and I do cling to that, Ephesians 2:10. Again, Caleb's awesome. We're not like he's awesome, but it's just challenging, and sometimes I'm thinking, what am I doing? I have no clue what I'm doing. I have to say, the Lord's prepared me in advance for what he's called me to do, and he's prepared all of his children in advance for what he's called us to do. So I think it's just, keeping our focus on him. Like I said, first service, what Walt says a lot, Eugene Peterson, I think obedience in the same direction, just that constant obedience. And he's, one of our life verses, trust in the Lord, lean not on your own understanding. He will make your path straight, or he'll crown your efforts with success, whichever translation. It's just so much joy, even in the struggle, and I don't ever want it, like Chris said, we're nothing, but God.
Amen.
But God's so good, and he's so great, and he has something so amazing that is so much bigger than all of us. We could have never put Caleb's story together. I saw just what was right in front of me. I didn't see the big picture where I saw one child. God saw across the world a whole family, and that just, I always remind myself of that when I try to limit God, or when I'm putting myself down or feeling inadequate, that it's not about me anyway. It's his goodness and his grace and his power at work within us that is what makes his name known, and that's just what we want to do. And though I think it's, like Chris said, Caleb, his biggest challenge is not being able to talk, and that wasn't something we were anticipating. But, it's amazing what you can learn and see in Caleb when he can't even maybe have a conversation with you. And that just is another thing, that it's not necessarily our words that bring God glory. It's our hearts. And Caleb's got a pretty good heart. Blake may disagree, but I'm just joking. I'm joking. But he's got a good heart. And I did give a shout out to you, Blake, in Faith and Living first service. God knew the perfect siblings for Caleb too. We are beyond blessed with amazing siblings for Caleb. He's a lucky fellow.
Yep. So speaking of that, I'm going to ask Caleb and Blake to come up front, and we're going to close out in prayer. So if y'all would, come on up, bud. Yep. Again, we got two other girls, but they went for the first service. So If you will, pray with us, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for just your power that works within us, that can do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. Thank you so much for Ryan and Heidi and for their obedience to you, God, initially, just to love Caleb so much that they were willing to sacrifice their life with him. And so, God, thank you just for the people that have all been a part of this, that they have, that you've worked in their lives to bring it to this point. And God, I pray for the future and just for how you're going to continue to use Caleb and his family, Lord, just to continue to bring you glory. And God, I pray for those who are listening, who are watching online, who hear this story, God, that it would bring you glory and that it would challenge them to follow you, to trust you, to put their strength in you. And God, if someone is wavering in any decision that they need to make or any doubt of you, God, just let them look at Caleb and let them know that you are God and know that you can do great and mighty things. And just all we got to do is give you a yes. And so, God, let us continue to give you that yes and trust in you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your love, for your grace, and for your salvation that's come. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.